And welcome to the New England Job Show. My name is Brian Henchy. With us today is Mark McCurdy. He's the author of the book Strategic Volunteering, 50 Ingredients to Transform Your Life and Career. He's the founder of the nonprofit Career Coach and managing partner of Scion Nonprofit Staffing. As an author, executive recruiter, and trainer in the nonprofit sector, Mark has helped over 4,000 professionals find their purpose within nonprofit organizations, as well as help hundreds of social good organizations to discover strategic employees. Mark McCurdy, welcome to the New England Job Show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So first of all, what did you do before you started Scion Nonprofit Staffing? What were you doing with your life prior to that?
Prior to that, I was actually working at a nonprofit as a career coach. So I was working with an organization called The Workplace.
Okay.
So there's three career workforce centers in Boston, and The Workplace being one of them. So I worked with them for about a year and a half, helping individuals with their vocational aspirations.
Good. What caused you to write the book?
So in 2008, I'd moved back home from Washington, D.C., and at that time, I'd opened my own company called Jobs and Nonprofits. And so that organization was focused on connecting individuals with nonprofits, and that's generally my background, kind of helping find human capital for nonprofits. I'd done that in New York, as I mentioned, D.C., and then moved back to do that here in Boston. And in 2008, I wouldn't have to tell you, obviously, the economy wasn't doing as hot as it had in the past.
Yes.
So from that experience, the business really not taking off as I thought it should, I became depressed. I started myself becoming depressed and wondering, God, what am I going to do with my career next? And I really turned to volunteering myself. And that really helped me kind of put me back on track, and ultimately led me back into career coaching and counseling, and as of today, also led me into Scion Staffing, Scion Nonprofit Staffing. So I'll probably tell you a little bit more on that later, but that's the short story.
So one thing that I know that you talk about is something called strategic volunteering.
Right.
Now, I had never heard that phrase until talking with you, so can you tell our viewers what is strategic volunteering? How does that differ from just plain volunteering?
Sure. And obviously plain volunteering is wonderful, and not something I'd all put down, and I do it myself as well. But when thinking about kind of your career, or even perhaps some different life challenges, there can be a strategy that you can look at to really help you to that next level. And for me, obviously, well, not obviously, but for me it was really career focused, and that's for the most part where the book is focused as well. And really thinking about a strategy that you'll think about, write down, some really important questions to ask yourself, and once you go through answering those questions, then what emerges is really a strategy of where you might want to look to volunteer.
So what are a few of those questions, for example?
Sure. So I call it really kind of recipe number one in the book is really about passion, right? So what are you really passionate about? And normally when you're doing a job search, it's not a question that historically comes up frequently. And so this is kind of ingredient number one that you really want to look at to say, well, yeah, what am I really excited about? And sometimes this is thinking about, well, what kind of hobbies am I doing? Strategic volunteering certainly can play out significantly in the nonprofit sector, but it doesn't have to. I'd worked with an individual who loved beer. That was something he was very excited about. And ultimately, in asking these questions, kind of putting the strategy into place, he actually found a job working with the brewery.
Wow.
Yeah.
May I just stop to ask you,
Sure.
Was this by any chance with the volunteer organization called Harpoon Helps that he got involved with and then started working for Harpoon? I'm just curious.
I don't believe so.
Okay, just curious, because I don't do a lot of volunteering, to be perfectly frank, but I've been involved with Harpoon Helps, and they do a lot of things for cancer research and a bunch of other things. So, but anyway, so passion, what are your interests? What other sort of questions, ingredients do you get into?
Exactly. Another big one is really purpose, and for me it's really about thinking about what's the community or population that you really would like to serve, and or to rethink about that question is saying what community or population do you want to see their dreams come true. And so again, it's just kind of rethinking a little bit about where that might be for you. And kind of the beauty about this whole ingredients is as you change as an individual, conceivably your recipes are going to change as well. So what I might be really passionate about today certainly may change 10 years from now, and that's okay. This isn't to say find your destiny, and this is what you're going to do necessarily the rest of your life. For some, that certainly could be the case, but for others it may be, this is a great next step, really an empowering move, not only for myself, but actually to help other individuals, and that's really key to the equation is, really feeling as though, hey, you're helping individuals, you've chosen to help these individuals, and really feeling as though, that you're worthwhile, and that, that you can serve and really make a difference. So
take me as an example here. If I want to help out, let's say, military organizations with military families, what would be, if I'm passionate about, helping out these wonderful families that, give up so much of their own selves to help, ordinary Americans, what are some things that I would do to, I know that that's what I'm passionate about, but what would be sort of like my first few steps there to get going on figuring out what I can do to help them
some
out?
Ideas. Obviously, even starting there with asking some of these questions, but secondly is certainly doing some research. And there might be some interesting avenues that actually do turn up for you. So just as a small example, there's an organization called Bikes Not Bombs. They're out of Jamaica Plains. And you might not think initially, how is that related to military? Well,
yeah, explain that one.
What they're really about is, it's looking at a little slight different strategy and some different organizations that may ultimately have a very similar inner link. So it may be looking at organizations that maybe work very closely with the military, whether it be here or different militaries abroad. And so here's an organization that is kind of hooked on to a larger entity, so that being perhaps military.
Because I've thought about if I want to be involved with the Fisher House, which helps to take care of the families of loved ones going through, or military men and women who are going through rehab, something that I could do to help out the Fisher House, but I'm always wondering, I have no idea even how to get started, but other than to contact them and say, I have all these, different skills, what can I do to help you? So, but anyway, but less about me for a moment. I want to ask you about strategic volunteering. When you've helped out so many people, so can you give us some examples of, the economy's been really bad, and people who watch the New England Job Show know that it's been a bad economy the last few years. Can you give us a few examples of things that, that interactions you've had with clients that have really benefited them?
Definitely. One example that comes to mind is a woman who was making a career transition from really the finance industry into the nonprofit sector. And when we started kind of asking some of these questions about, what are you really passionate about? What came to mind is, God, you know what? I'm really passionate about healthy food. It's something where I've kind of brought up my family that way, and something I read regularly. I love to learn more about it. And then as we looked at, well, what's the community or population that you really want to serve? It came down to, I really feel drawn towards the low income. And so when we kind of put those two things together, it was looking at organizations that might be incorporating food along with helping the low income community. And so I was able to come up with a few names of organizations. She was able to come up with a few organizations, and then she contacted these organizations and just said, I found you guys, I'd love to learn more, can I come in and talk to someone? And ultimately what that led to is 5 meetings that took place, and ultimately she decided on a nonprofit out in Metro West, and this was an organization that basically had a food pantry and was focused on the low-income community, and she started volunteering there. Really enjoyed it. She came up actually herself kind of with this idea of providing basically a recipe table. So as you come into the food pantry, which normally the case is you kind of come in and get out, not a place of community necessarily. Well, it is community, but as a sense of as far as people really staying there and sticking around and talking to each other. Well, now with this recipe table, individuals would come through and say, "Wow, what's the recipe of the week?" And so they'd come, they'd look, and they could actually taste some of these recipes, and 90% of the ingredients were at the food pantry, and everyone really liked it. Everyone really enjoyed it. And this was an idea that she came up with as a volunteer. One thing led to another, and she was probably there about 6 or 7 weeks, and a manager position opened up at the food pantry.
Perfect.
And guess who got the job?
Wow.
She got the job. Now, obviously, can this happen in every instance? No, but what's really important is that she took initiative. It wasn't someone telling her about this opportunity and she said, all right, let me check them out. She actually searched them out, found them under certain criteria, and then gave a call and said, look, I found you all, I'd love to learn more. And then, again, she took action and got in there, started volunteering, and then she came up with a really creative idea that really helped this population, right? And so, as an employer, they said, wow, here's someone that searched us out, who came up with some really creative ideas, who's really helping the community, and clearly she gets the environment. She knows what she's getting into, and so it was, I think, a very comfortable and kind of natural progression, that she ended up, being a permanent employee, with this organization.
And this kind of coincides with what I've seen in terms of, I've been doing my job search for the last 2 years, even though I have 4 part-time jobs right now in radio. But anyway, just that a lot of people want you to deliver value immediately. Even if you want to go into radio sales or some sort of sales situation, they want you to come through the door, like in the interview, if you can get an interview, they want you to come through the door and know things that you already want to do.
Right.
They want you full of ideas before you even get the job.
That's true.
So, but anyway, you also had somebody else who had a mid-career transition. You want to tell that story?
Yeah. So, this last example was again of an individual who had over 20 years in finance and was able to successfully make this transition. Another example was of a young woman who had about 5 or 6 years underneath her belt and was doing that more in this kind of PR marketing realm, but really interested, really passionate about a particular health organization. It's a national health organization, and she had been doing some volunteering there. So she knew the kind of ins and outs. She knew that in learning more about the organization, that there wasn't maybe quite a fit for her right away. But her strategy was learning about, where do you see the larger need here? And where do you see the organization growing? And what she found out was in the development and fundraising realm. So what she decided to do was really stay volunteering with the organization, but go out and search for development and fundraising work. So she was able to go out and focus those skills, get into a small nonprofit, and that can be a really key equation, is finding smaller nonprofits, because they're oftentimes willing to give individuals that are looking to make a career transition or otherwise a little bit more of a chance. In which case, she was able to, in a year, significantly increase the fundraising that for this smaller nonprofit. So a year later, she was able to turn around to this national health organization and say, look what I've done in a year. And ultimately they said, yeah, you've done really phenomenal work. You've been a volunteer with us for over 2.5 or 3 years, I think. And she was able to get really her dream job in nonprofits.
Wow.
So again, that was a different strategy with her kind of going out, getting some skills, but keeping her eye on the prize, so to speak, and knowing where her big, deep passion was with this health organization, staying engaged, which is very important, and ultimately following through. So that's another kind of different example, but of a successful one.
That's excellent. Yeah, and it's another one of those things of ultimately, or doing what it is that you ultimately want. So it's kind of like being what it is that you want to become, if that makes any sense. Also, not only can you benefit nonprofit organizations, but when you're doing nonprofit work and when you're volunteering, you also can get some benefits to yourself, like feeling good because you're doing something that you care about. So why don't you tell us some of the benefits that people get by doing volunteering?
Again, there's been a lot of research, more recently on this. And in fact, we have a slide that we might be able to even jump to, which maybe would be number 3.
Okay.
And this is talking about kind of the growing research on volunteering, and really the key component which they highlight here. This is a study done by the Corporation for National and Community Service.
Okay.
And they really talk about volunteering can really help you have lower mortality rates, greater functional ability, and lower rates of depression. And I think that can be a really key component, actually, is this depression piece. Because when you do become depressed, oftentimes you kind of shut down your creativity. And so as you volunteer, it can really help you to be more positive, and thus kind of releasing more of your creativity to look at different ideas, different situations, or even different contexts, maybe in a new light. I think that's really important too. A lot of this strategic volunteering is not only about taking immediate action and getting engaged, but also who are you around, right? You've already thought about, what are you passionate about? What does the community or population really want to serve? And chances are other people, may have very similar thoughts or passions that are now engaged with these organizations, right? So you begin to develop a professional network that's really a long-term, really long-term friendships. And I've certainly seen them turn into more than friendships too. But again, really thinking about the relationships that you can develop at the organization as well. Even as a volunteer, I've certainly heard stories of individuals who have gone into volunteered and they've been recommended maybe another organization, another company that they may want to, reach out to, or that they've been able to make a connection, and that it's worked out positively, for paid employment. So there's another kind of added benefit to this strategic volunteering, which is really thinking about where do you want to plant your career seeds and just keep on watering it, and then to watch those really grow.
And that's excellent, because not only when you're doing the volunteering, for everybody who's been unemployed for a while, the worst thing you can do is stay at home. And you might be on the internet for hours and hours and hours, but to actually get out and meet with people. But if you're volunteering, you're socializing, you're engaging with other people, you're hopefully adding new skills, meeting other people who can help you in your career transition, whatever it is that you ultimately want to do. So everything you said is positive, and like you just said, the best thing is having a lower rate of depression. So being unemployed can be really tough. So why don't we also talk about money? When a lot of people think that when you work for a nonprofit that it is impossible to make a decent salary, or at least I think a lot of people think that if you're in nonprofit, there's no way that you can really make a very good living. Is that true?
I think it definitely falls in that stereotype, right?
Okay.
And so my answer to that is you can certainly make a good living at it. Here in Massachusetts, over 13% of the population is employed by nonprofits.
Really?
Yeah. And there are also some interesting data out there as well that say the nonprofit sector as a whole is among the top 3 largest sectors in the nation. So that's, again, another interesting way to think about it. And so a lot of people, forget about hospitals or educational institutions or some of these other organizations that actually are nonprofits. So sometimes it's kind of opening up you're opening up your awareness to what other historically definitions of nonprofits, they may look a little different. And particularly now they may even, not only look but also feel a little bit different as well. So we talk about kind of social good organizations a little bit before, and these are generally kind of social enterprises that are about a particular service or product, but really also about making the world a better place as well. And I've definitely seen a larger trend as far as individuals either looking to make a career transition or even coming out of school saying, yeah, I'd really love to be part of an organization that has a larger mission. So I think that we'll be seeing more and more of that here in the future as well.
I don't know if the Life is Good t-shirt company is nonprofit. I have no idea, but I know that that's like a company that's very much into doing good things, and even every time you buy one of their t-shirts that say Life is Good or whatever, a portion of that goes to their...
They have a foundation.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Life is Good themselves, I kind of put them in the social good organization. So Life is Good as a incorporated company, they don't have a nonprofit, but they do have a foundation. And as you said, certain sales will go, towards this foundation, which is, I think it's called Playmakers, actually.
Okay, it's been a while since I actually researched them a while back and to learn more about what it was that they were actually doing, and it was a little convoluted trying to find out what it is exactly that they do. But it's definitely another organization that's trying to make the world a better place.
For sure.
So yeah. What about some industries are shrinking, like radio? How is nonprofit doing? Is nonprofit, is it growing? Is it getting smaller? Is it staying the same? What's sort of the future growth or shrinkage of nonprofit?
Yeah, well, why don't we maybe look at slide number 5?
Okay.
Slide 5. We can hit two birds with one stone here.
Okay.
And this is a graph here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay.
And what this shows is over basically a 10-year span where employment trends have been for-profit compared with nonprofit.
Okay.
So the blue we can see is the nonprofit, and the red is the for-profit. And so 2000, 2007 were between 2000 and 2008, those were the major increases for nonprofit jobs. And then obviously we can see 2008, with the economy doing what it has, there was a big drop in for-profit jobs and then a marginal increase for nonprofit jobs. And in 09 and 010, you could see something similar where, again, very marginal increase for nonprofit jobs, but again, a decrease for for-profit jobs. So although the nonprofit sector hasn't grown as it has back in the early 2000s and even mid 2000s, it is still growing. And I think that's really important to think about. And so definitely there are organizations that are growing, even some like wildfire. Some that I've spoken to this year that are looking to triple in size.
Wow.
I was just on the phone with an organization that generally I would say is focused on kind of human services, direct services, and they've grown, over the last 2 or 3 years. Their development department alone used to be a department of 6. Now they're over 30. So there are definitely organizations doing really great work, being able to really prove that, show it, be really engaged in the community, bring in some great volunteers, and are growing.
What are some specific areas that are growing?
So I would definitely say the health sector is definitely something to look at. And a lot of times you say health sector and you immediately think nurses. There are definitely needs for nurses, but from my expertise, generally it comes more from the back office. So this is administration, programming, and fundraising and development. These are big areas. But as a sector, I'd say healthcare is definitely one that you'd want to be attuned to. Another is certainly in the environment. we know what's going on with the whole global warming area of things, and certainly Massachusetts has a lot of kind of neat things going on, from the sustainability to solar power to wind power, all these different things going on.
Right.
And so this is an area that you'd want to think about and look at, research further, and ideally get to know some people that maybe are engaged in there. Or, again, what we're talking about here is volunteering. So what better way to learn about an organization, meet the people inside, to get out, get engaged,
Right.
see the environment, and then ultimately really decide, hey, yeah, this is someplace I could really see myself dedicating some longer term time, or, hey, they did great work. I'm happy to recommend others to it, but maybe I want to look for something slightly different.
And because we're running a little tight on time, why don't you also tell us, what about special degrees or special experience? What do you need any special qualifications in order to start working, either for profit or volunteering at a nonprofit, and as well as some of the upcoming trends going on in nonprofit?
There are certain, areas where a degree may be, or an additional degree may be necessary. So, direct service actually is one of the areas, particularly of major growth right now, and so that may require, an MSW or something along those lines.
An MSW?
A Master of Social Work.
Okay. Just want to make sure
that everyone's on the same page. Sure. So that being one example. Certainly, with larger organizations, larger nonprofits, kind of the larger you get, a lot of the times the more not only competition there is, but the more need for perhaps an MBA or a master's in public administration, an MPA. Organizations may oftentimes say, additional degree or MBA or MPA preferred.
Huh, okay.
And so again, it's something to be aware of. I always recommend if it says preferred, but you have everything else, go ahead and apply for it. Try for it. But again, what we're talking about here is kind of getting in kind of through that back door, which is through volunteering, really getting to learn about the organization, ideally being able to prove some of your value, bringing value in, and then seeing where it might be able to take you.
Cool.
Did I answer all your questions?
The other question is, and I don't know how much time do we have? All right, about a minute. All right, so what are some of the upcoming trends in the sector? Answer that quickly and we'll plug your book and we'll be done.
I think we pretty much hit on them. We talked about the health sector, the environmental sector. Those are, I think, trending areas for us to be aware of. Volunteerism itself, that is on the rise as well. So I think that's, again, something for you to think about. Yeah, I think just generally this kind of trend as far as there's more information out there as far as nonprofit jobs, nonprofit trends. So easy to kind of Google it in and find some additional information as well.
And that sounds excellent because, like I said before, it really seems like volunteering is such a fantastic opportunity to try to get your foot in the door somewhere, and it can be something that you really like and something that you want to do. So I want to thank you very much, Mark. We're out of time.
Excellent.
Just want to mention the book again, Strategic Volunteering, 50 Ingredients to Transform Your Life and Career by Mark McCurdy. Pardon me.
You can find that on Amazon.com.
All right, fantastic. And my name's Brian Henchy. This has been the New England Job Show. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.